Hey, little man. I sure heard a bunch about you. See, I was a friend of your father's. We were in the Hanoi pit of hell together for 5 years. I hope you never have to experience this yourself, Butch, but when two men are in a situation like that for such a long period of time, one man will start to assume the responsibilities of another. So if things had worked out differently, Major Coolidge would be standing in my living room talking to my son Jim. But the way things have worked out, I'm sitting here talking to you. Butch, I've got something for you. See this watch I've got here? This watch was first purchased by your great-grandfather during the First World War from a little general store in Knoxville, Tennessee. It was made by the first company to ever make wristwatches. You see, back then, people just wore pocket watches. It was bought by Private Ryan Coolidge the day he set sail for Paris. This was your great-grandfather's war watch, and he wore it every day that he was in that war. When the war was over, he went back home to your great-grandmother, took the watch off his wrist, and put it in an old coffee can. And there it stayed until your grandfather, Dane Coolidge, was called upon by his country to go overseas and fight. Again with the Germans. Only this time they called it World War II. So your great-grandfather gave this watch to your grandfather for good luck. Now, sadly, Dane's luck wasn't as good as his old man's. Dane was a Marine and he was killed with all the other Marines in the Battle of Wake Island. Your grandfather was facing death. He knew it. None of those boys had any illusions about getting off that island alive. So 3 days before the Japanese took the island, he approached a gunner on an aircraft transport, a guy named Winaki, who he'd never met before in his life, asked him to deliver to his infant son, who he'd never seen in the flesh, his dad's gold watch. This watch. 3 days later, your grandfather was dead. But Winaki kept his word. When the war was over, he paid a visit to your grandmother and delivered the watch to your infant father. This watch was on your dad's wrist when we were shot down together over Hanoi. We were captured and put in a Vietnamese prison camp. Now your dad knew if the gooks ever found the watch, that they'd confiscate it and take it away. Now the way your dad looked at it, this watch was your birthright. Now he'd be damned if some slope's going to get his greasy old hands on his boy's birthright. So he hid it. He hid it in the one place he knew he could hide something. In his ass. For 5 years he wore this watch. Up his ass. He died of dysentery and he gave the watch to me. For 2 years I had this uncomfortable hunk of metal in my ass. Then, after 7 years, the war ended and I was allowed to come home to my family. So now, little man, I give the watch to you.